last month. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes from last month?
Nope.
Nope, seeing none. Okay, anybody ready to move those minutes? Somebody, Ron, thank you. Michael, second. Everybody in approval? Yep. Okay, good. We're good to go. What do we got? Public comments. I don't think, Steph, there's nobody in public comments. Okay, excellent. So on to council referrals, number 4. So Daniel, over to you.
Robyn. All right, I have a short presentation I'll just try to put up here. Sorry, my screen's real messed up.
That's okay.
Which one are you, what are you looking at right now?
We're seeing PowerPoint. So we're seeing the main slide, but we're also seeing all the PowerPoint stuff and the slides coming up.
And if I do this, you're still seeing that?
Yep, we're still seeing that.
Okay, because it puts it on the wrong screen. Okay, let's try again.
I know. Dual screens and Zoom presenter mode, all that kind of stuff.
Well, and it does it differently. When I do it from home, I have 3 screens. Or 2 screens. And when I do it here, I have 3 screens, and it does it differently.
Okay, we're still seeing the PowerPoint, so.
All right, but not.
It's not like presenter mode or anything. It's just seeing all of PowerPoint and all of the slides. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, there we go. That's it. Yeah, yeah, that looks good. Yeah.
All right. All right. So we have a rezoning application for Area 1 of CD 18, which is the Arbutus Ridge development, for those who aren't aware. So it's off of Windjammer, sort of just past Malkin Creek. As you come up the road, and you can see it has the CD 18 zone that was rezoned in, I believe, 2013, and is currently underway. There's been some subdivisions done and some building done, but it's still, the bulk of it is still unsubdivided. So there's just the ortho you can see in our 2018 ortho. The main road is put in, but not much clearing work done. So this zone permits dwelling, it permits open space and public trails and accessory uses. It permits up to 38 dwellings within the zone. So that was what the CD zoning allowed. But crucially for this application, it doesn't permit accessory residential use, which is our term for secondary suites, attached or detached. And so what I brought in the staff report was just to look at, okay, what other zones don't permit this accessory residential use? And largely it's areas in Snug Cove where it's attached dwellings. So things like Artisan Square, townhouses in Kate's Hill, areas around the golf course where it's, again, smaller places, or in Snug Cove House development or in the pub. Are the other areas that I could find that don't permit accessory residential use. There are a couple other CD zones, like the Evergreen zone allows a limited number of accessory residential use, so not every lot can have one, but it's a more limited permission. So the Arbutus Ridge is in a comprehensive development area in the OCP, so there's some language that describes what it will look like. It talks about clusters of detached dwellings interspersed by open space trails and natural areas. And then a specific policy, again, with that same sort of goal for clustered development and retention of natural vegetation. So the application is to permit that accessory residential use throughout Area 1. And then in the report I break down, there's a number of active subdivisions for the majority of the lots. And so based on that estimate, we would think 15 of those 38 lots would be large enough for detached secondary suites, and the rest would be permitted attached secondary suites, I guess, unless the minimum lot size for detached secondary suites changes, which I think we'll talk about later maybe. So, I mean, that's essentially the breakdown. The staff report goes into, staff had some considerations for the applicant to work through the application. So things like water supply and ensuring that there's septic provided on each site, hydrant concerns. And so when this came to council, council referred it to the Housing Advisory Committee, but also to the local water advisory committee for the area, the Parks and Trails Committee, and the Advisory Planning Commission. And open for any discussion.
Could you go back to the map, Daniel? I just want to be really clear
Yeah.
about the area. So it's only area 1 that we're talking about because there's a number of areas and it would only be applicable to part of that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so area 3 is essentially the park zoning. So some of that area has been provided to municipality as park and some is slated to become through further subdivisions. And then area 2 is got the sort of unique cottage residential development zoning, and it's governed by a housing agreement.
Okay. And is area 1 the one right down by Windjammer? Is that what's kind of what is referred to as like the West Side Park? Is that open area right now that has the start of the playground?
That's
or where
kind
is
of
that?
under, yeah, that's like under where it's the map is labeling RR1.
Okay.
That's essentially where that west
park and then
is.
and the new road that whatever
And the
it is,
new road kind of
Joan Audrey
goes
or
up.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So area 1, so that's the only one they're talking about. They're not talking about, so area 3 is parkland, and then area 2 is that unique cottage zoning, and it's really only area 1 where these 38 lots are. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and essentially the bulk of the sort of normal residential development is area 1.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's clear. Does anybody have comments on this? Ron? Fritz? Yeah, Ron,
Daniel,
go ahead.
Just to be clear about one thing, if council were subsequently to change the rule requiring 0.9 of an acre for a secondary for a secondary residential building on the lot, would this would apply in this case? It wouldn't require a rezoning.
Correct. Like if council in this rezoning just put in, the only change we made to the zoning was just to add the words like accessory residential use as a accessory use, then it would just follow the general regulations. And if council changed the size, then it would impact any of the lots that it falls under.
Okay. Maureen, go ahead.
Would that have a similar impact on other CD zones?
Yeah, so any CD zone that allows the accessory residential use, if they have lots that are in that in between size, then they would similarly get captured in essence. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Danielle, the maybe one comment, like from, I believe that in the OCP it says somewhere that secondary suites are kind of excluded of that calculation of the island population, so to speak. So from a density point of view, I guess there's no issue because the OCP already seems to allow that. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like our OCP has this limit on the total number of lots is what it defines. And it says it's not to change from the 96 OCP. And then there's a footnote, and the footnote says it's to exclude secondary suites, detached secondary suites.
Yeah, so in a way that's what we're doing. So there's no issue with densification. And then I thought something about maybe asking about the lot configuration, because like a lot of zoning bylaws are kind of written for fairly standard lots, like rectangular and all that. So in this case, is it just lot size, or does it have something to do with other controls as setbacks or whatever? Like in some of the lots that are more sloped terrain, right? And particularly in some of the strata lots can have fairly random shapes, and the outcome may be different on different lots.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen again. Just to show you, like if you look on BOMAP now, it shows that first phase of, I guess, first 2 phases of subdivisions. The lots have been created. So around this cul-de-sac at the top of the hill, a couple off of Joan Audrey Lane, and then a couple off of Windjammer.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas then the sort of the rest, the balance of it is still in this like unsubdivided area. Although it has been like we've had a subdivision application for, as I said, I think the balance of the lots. So I'm not sure, like, don't quote me on how many, but you know, a number of them. And so that's one of the things in the staff report consideration, is just that we know in the subdivision application, you know, they'd submitted things like like an overall septic plan, so septic fit on each of the lots, and that
Okay.
you know, so things like that. So some of those things we'd flagged as like, okay, through this rezoning, we want them to look at it again in light of, you know, if you're building a detached secondary suite, does that still work? But overall, like, the general zoning regulations wouldn't change. So the setbacks would be the same. The overall building area would be the same. The number of, you know, accessory buildings you could build would be the same. So in theory, we're saying instead of building a garage, you could build a detached secondary suite, but it wouldn't be allowed more sort of building on the lot than you otherwise would.
And the setbacks?
The setbacks would remain the same.
Okay.
So some of the lots like that were already created, it's like, well, they, you know, well, one, they're probably too small for a detached secondary suite. And two, it's like, well, it wasn't considered. So, you know, now somebody could add a secondary suite within the house. But, you know, it may not be configured for a detached, but same as, you know, many of the lots on Bowen, when we put in detached secondary suites, like, you know, we obviously didn't do detailed analysis of all the lots on Bowen to say, are you configured for a detached secondary suite? And it's just, many can't and some can.
So Daniel, there are no subjective criteria, such as, like, give an example, right? So in many zones, there is a conditional component to it, so that it not unnecessarily overviews neighboring properties or you know, shadowing, privacy, all those kind of things. But of course, it's better if it's outright. But I'm just asking because that's something that comes up in many communities.
We have a development permit for detached secondary suites, and so that would apply.
That would apply. Okay.
To these. Yeah, they have exemptions, like if you're far enough from a property line, so larger properties can sometimes avoid the development permit stage, but I would imagine any of these would be captured by that.
So it's just out of interest, like the planning department, if it's conditional, does it have to go to council, or can you, as the director of planning, you have the authority to approve application?
Council has delegated development permit approval to the CAO, so Liam can approve.
Oh, okay, all right. Sounds good.
Robyn,
Michael, go ahead. Yeah.
Robyn, one of the questions I have is, if we go back to when this was originally approved by council, Daniel, roughly how many houses were we, say, were single family homes? How many homes are we? Did you say 30?
38.
38. So the average population of, shall we say 3 to 4 people? Shall we say it's 40? Just say, let's say 150 people potentially could live in that area.
I think Bowen were like 2.4 maybe per household.
Okay. So I mean, very, very roughly, not you know, call me a liar for 5, 10, 15%, but say that number. What is the potential to expand the population of that area, if this was to be approved?
You know, I mean, I guess it's like, well, one answer would be, well, all 38 could build a secondary suite, and you could have 38 more dwellings, likely occupied. Like, I don't think we have numbers on it, but sort of my gut would say secondary suites have a lower, you know, person per dwelling, because if they're in the house, they're likely smaller. You know, so it's like top end, you'd go 38 times 2.4, and you'd say it's that many. Realistically, I feel like, you know, our numbers, is it like a quarter of places end up with a suite?
Yeah.
You know, it's more because the new homes, it's more likely that you succeed in getting a secondary suite ready homes. But we notice, we do a lot of single family homes, and we notice that a lot of people don't want secondary suites, because the reason why they buy a single family home is to have the privacy and not have a secondary suite. But I think that in reality, it's a very slow process, and eventually some of those suites will be rented out if they're mandatory, so to speak. through other bylaws?
So my feedback is, in general, positive. Like, this is in line with what us as the Housing Advisory Committee, what we've been recommending, that we need more diversity in different neighborhoods, and having secondary suites attached or detached is in line with that. So I think that's overall, it's a positive thing. I would be supportive of it. And again, knowing that the development permit process, water, sewer, you know, like all of those things get taken care of through all of the other regulations that are already in place. So that doesn't have to be rehashed. And setbacks and height limits and site coverage and all that stuff. And I was interested to look at, in your report, the existing zoning, which is, they have a lot coverage of 25%, which is sort of lower than, slightly under average. And they also have a maximum floor area of 260 square meters, which is, you know, very roughly 2,600 square feet, that, you know, probably a little bit bigger, which is interesting. And then, but that excludes garages and accessory buildings. And so, so I think my further comment is, I think this is a really great opportunity, if there was support from council, to potentially introduce the idea that we've been talking about two-tiered zoning, which Fritz was just sort of hinting at then, that they outright could, you know, build within these confines of 25% lot coverage in the 260 square meters, if they want to just build their straight out house. But if they want to build a either suite ready or an attached suite or a detached suite, there's a potential for bonuses. And this is a way to incentivize people. So maybe do they get some extra square meters to build? Maybe do they get a bit more lot coverage? Like, this is a really interesting opportunity for a relatively small number of places for us to look at that concept of kind of this two-tier. So they could do, like we call it, outright as it is. But if they want these extra things, maybe we incentivize them and they get bonuses. So I think it's a really great opportunity to introduce something like that. Obviously, the details would have to be worked out, and some work would have to be done as to what's reasonable. But I think it could be really interesting, and it's a relatively small number of lots. It's not like we're just talking about island-wide, blanket rezonings where it opens up the can of a whole thing. But I think it's a really great opportunity, and it could be, again, because their lot coverage is actually slightly lower than average. You'd have to go back to that original approval a number of years ago as to if there was strong reasoning behind that. And maybe it was to do with the clustered zoning and having lots of greenery and parkland. So I don't want to sort of overstep that. But from a point of view as the Housing Advisory Committee, I think there's a great opportunity here that you could provide bonuses and incentives for people to want to build that diverse housing that we're seeking on the island.
Yeah, I think Robyn's point to increase the site coverage to some degree, that makes sense to me. And I agree with everything that Robyn says. It looks to me that it's a great opportunity.
Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah. It's also providing a significant potential lift in the value of the lots that are being sold. And the two-tier zoning making sense to help enable incentives for the owners, the ultimate owners of the individual lots to build is one thing. But is there anything that the municipality needs to think about in terms of capturing the lift in value in these lots?
That's a great question. Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, it's always sort of a question. Like, I think it's these lots at time of rezoning, we had placed a covenant on them that they make a contribution to the community center with each building permit. So in essence, it was like the development had promised it overall. And then the way it was done was covenant that at each building permit, they provide a contribution.
How much was that? Do you recall?
I don't recall. Is it like 13,000 a lot?
So not an insignificant amount. Like that's a good chunk, especially if you're the one applying for the permit.
Yeah,
it's a good chunk.
I think that's
money.
right, because it was like 500,000 in total. So that's, my math is about right. I think that's right. So
perhaps we might propose that there be a additional contribution. I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure how this all works.
I mean, it always gets tricky in terms of, yeah, are we worried about, and I guess it's sort of a council decision. Yeah, like what is the lift in value? What is the increase? Is it something then that, well, council determines that that's a community benefit overall versus, no, this is like private. So like, for example, I think when we did the secondary suites and we did detached secondary suites, we did it island wide. We didn't seek, you know, obviously contributions from people.
Yeah.
So it is council viewing this rezoning as well. It's more like that. It's more like catching up on that piece. And the benefit is the increased housing options. Or is this more like a CD rezoning where somebody's seeking additional units and additional, you know, development potential that where we're trying to seek amenity contributions?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that needs to be put forward to council, you know, as clearly as possible. And there's a lot of balancing going on there. I went down. I went down and drove around the area. It's a lovely area. You know, to have small homes down there for renters, I think would be terrific. It's on the transit route. It's near some of the beaches. This discussion is happening at a point when you don't have a lot of you don't have people actually living there, so it's the right time to be having a discussion about you know, the potential density increase.
Yes. Robyn?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
Robyn, I agree, and this is obviously a whole lot. The reason I brought up the amount of people living there, the only thing I suppose is, does anyone feel that this is a very broad road going up there? It's probably one of the best roads on Bowen, actually. That road going up there. I too have been had a look around, and you know, great. I don't think we will get opposition from people in the surrounding neighborhood about increased traffic and usage. That is something we may have to consider, because when it was put to them beforehand, when this originally came to be, that there was no objections, and to my knowledge, I don't know, Maureen, whether you remember it. I don't remember any objections to this.
It predated us on council.
Did it?
Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
My goodness, it goes back that far. Okay, so I don't know whether locally people are going to say, wow, this is suddenly going to become a very busy, it won't, by the way, but the people will say it becomes a very busy area. It does. My only thought was it significantly increases the usage and the population in that area, and only significantly because there's nothing there now, and there's going to be a group of people there later on. So significant is relative. It comes off a very low base. But otherwise, as Maureen said, this is a time to do it, to give this approval. So when people are building their houses, this can be done and don't have to be retrofitted afterwards and all that other nonsense. This can be incorporated in the design. And do I presume, Daniel, that's one of the primary motivations to get this approved so people can design their houses accordingly?
I mean, yeah, it's like, you know, the applicants want to know that's an option as they move forward.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, exactly. Then sort of the earlier in this process, you know, then the better, because then you've designed it that way.
Yeah. And I believe, Ron, oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, then you know, given that, the logic seems quite compelling, and it seems to be something I personally, sitting in council, knowing what I know now, subject to any further discussions, would want to support, largely because of the amount of secondary suites it would potentially offer on the island.
And Ron, I did see your hand, and then Fritz, but I'll just comment on what Michael had said. I think it's true, because I live near this subdivision, and I would often walk there, you know, years past before any of this started. And I think, to your point, like it sounds a little harsh. The damage has been done already. Like the fact that the road's gone through and it's been subdivided. I believe some construction work has started. I haven't been up there lately, but there are houses underway. So the changes have already happened. So I would hope that the neighbors aren't going to be too, there wouldn't be too much negative feedback for adding suites, because really what was, essentially, as so many places on Bowen, when they're undeveloped lots, they feel like a park, they feel like the forest. And then all of a sudden they get subdivided and developed, and, the roads go in and the noise and everything. Yeah, the only major one I know from some people that I know nearby is potentially introducing traffic calming measures, but I think that's a separate discussion. When you had that big, wide, freshly asphalted road, there was a lot of late night activity happening up and down it. But anyways, that's a whole separate thing. Ron, you had a comment, and then I'll go to Fritz. Oh, Ron, you're on mute.
I wanted to revert to a previous point, so perhaps Fritz should speak first.
Oh, Fritz, did you have a comment building on what we had been talking about?
Yeah, I think that if you look at secondary suites, it isn't necessarily done by people who just want to rent out, make more money. We find that many times it's for personal reasons. It's for having, older parents living in the house, or having your kids living in the house, or it is for a caregiver living in the house. All these things that disturb a normal single family home, but do not disturb that particular format. So in a way, I think that every house should be secondary suite ready, which means that you can build it and then let people decide if they use it or not. So this fear that there suddenly is tons more traffic, I don't really believe that. I think that it allows people to be together without driving or so. You have to see how it pans out. I don't believe in that fear that suddenly all the roads are packed. I believe it's a very slow process. A lot of people may not even use their suite. They just do it because they invest in the future, so to speak. And a detached secondary suite is not cheap to build. It is far more expensive than a secondary suite that is part of the home. It's new footings, it's more services, it goes on and on. So the idea that everybody says, oh, so cute, I built a detached secondary suite, when they go through the numbers and the cost, they may not even do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to Ron, and then I'm just checking our timing here on our. So go ahead.
As regards secondary suites or secondary buildings on the same lot, I referred to the possibility of reducing the requirement from 0.9 acres of an acre to 0.25. And Robyn, you referred to the idea of density bonuses. And I wonder, are these two alternative strategies toward the same goal? And if so, Daniel, would one or the other of them be either more efficient or perhaps more applicable island-wide than the other?
I guess lowering the average lot size is a way of sort of increasing the number of lots that could potentially build detached secondary suites. Probably then it works in concert with then trying to some sort of density bonusing, because as you get smaller lots, it probably gets harder for people to fit it in, and they're more likely to be close to their density level. So then it maybe becomes more of an incentive for people. Like if you're on a 10-acre lot, you can probably build a detached secondary suite, and there's no chance that you're maxing out your stuff anyways, versus if you're on a half-acre lot, well, maybe it gets closer to your limit, and you're more likely to say, oh, if I can build a little bit more, it makes it more feasible.
Okay, so Daniel, is it the square footage of the secondary suite, detached or attached, right? Can you confirm that it's included or excluded from the maximum house size?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Do you mean in this zone or in general?
Yeah, because that would be the bonus. Like we noticed, that people will build detached the secondary suites if they're excluded from floor space. In West Vancouver, they're included. Nobody does it because they have to take it out of the square footage of their home. Now they can't build the home they want to build. In Vancouver, it's excluded, and therefore people build secondary suites.
Yeah. So we do secondary suites, like we have attached that allowed up to 90 square meters, and the detached is allowed as a proportion of the lot size But in essence, if you're on a 1 acre lot, you can build a 90 square meter detached. And if you're on a 2 acre lot, you can build 115 square meters, which is like 1,250 square feet. And that's the maximum. And that is included in your lot coverage. And it would be included in the maximum floor area if the zone has a maximum floor area, which most of our zones don't. So like if you're in Kate's Hill, your lots are probably too small for a detached, but you could build an attached secondary suite, but it would be coming out of your FSR. So if you're 0.3 FSR, you have to include the 90 square meters for your secondary suite is part of that.
Well, that's the key difference of getting secondary suites built or not, is that bonus. And here you can see how two-tier zoning, which is, in a way, it's two-tier zoning, it's a bonus. And if you have 900 square feet extra to build, yeah, that makes a difference in the value of your lot. And then people may justify building that secondary suite. If you have to take it out of your home and now suddenly your home doesn't provide what you expect from your home, then it's not going to happen. And it's true, what you're saying is because there is no maximum floor space. Floor space is not used to regulate size of homes in most places of Bowen. That's a huge amount of power and control that council is not using to get what council wants or the municipality wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for it's sort of more true on the smaller lots. Like I think the larger lots, like basically we regulate by lot coverage and very few people hit the maximum. We have a maximum floor area for accessory buildings as well. And again, very few people hit the maximum. But on smaller lots, when you get down to like half acre or quarter acre, people are hitting them. People are maxing out their lot coverage.
Yeah, but I think, Daniel, in one case, people will just build a larger and larger house and still don't have the incentive to build it separately as a secondary suite. I think that's the difference. So if you have a maximum floor space for your home and you get a bonus to do a secondary suite, then you build a secondary suite. And it doesn't mean you have to rent it out, but it's there and it's ready to be used. That's the difference. But if it's only in Bowen, the house can be so enormous in size that floor space has actually become totally irrelevant.
Right. And I guess I think of it as two different stages. So one is like, well, is it a currently, does our maximum lot coverage or maximum FSR hinder people building secondary suites? And it's like, well, maybe in smaller lots it would. Like maybe if you're in Kate's Hill, you're going to hit your FSR. You don't want to lose, or some of these zones that have that maximum floor area, like the Arbutus Ridge one, maybe you're hitting the maximum and you're hindered from putting a secondary, versus larger ones where you're saying, well, no, we need to put in a maximum to create the incentive. So people aren't hindered right now on a bigger lot, they just aren't incentivized.
I'm wondering if we bring it back specifically, because this is what we're talking about, is this CD zoning, which actually does have a maximum floor area of this 260 square meters, which is, generous. It's not over the top, but it's a generous house. And this lot coverage of 25%. So I think, like Fritz, you're saying the same thing that I think there's an opportunity there to provide that bonus of, and I don't know exactly what the numbers are. Do you give them the full bonus of 90 square meters for building a suite? Do you give them kind of half of it to incentivize them? I appreciate kind of what Maureen had been saying and what a few people have been saying about the value of the land. So if you are giving them extra square footage, you're certainly adding value to the land, but then it's also going to, and Ron just kind of wrote us a little a chat, like it does increase the costs of the house as well, right? If you're building a secondary suite attached or detached, it's adding to the cost of the house. So you are investing in that as well. So I think if we bring it back to this specific CD zoning that we're talking about, I would be in strong favor of providing some kind of bonus. And we can talk specifics if you want in the next 10 minutes or so that we have, or we can leave it to you. But I would suggest that you provide some kind of bonus square footage, square meters, whether it's the full size or a partial size, but that will incentivize people to actually build those suites detached or attached. And then word it in a way, because at the moment it says the maximum floor area of all buildings, excluding garages and accessory buildings. So you may just have to tweak that language, that it includes all residential buildings or residential use buildings or whatever that needs to be. Yeah, is that, Fritz, that's kind of in line with what you were
I agree.
saying? Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking about some of the other developments on Island. So for example, I think I've got this straight, in the second phase of Evergreen, there's the maximum, and then the folks there, my understanding is that they work within that maximum, they can build a second home. So what you're getting there are one larger home, or a modest home plus a detached secondary suite. And I mean, we've talked about in passing in this committee, and we certainly have talked about it in the Environment and Climate Action, about the desire to have smaller homes generally, for a whole bunch of reasons, including that we've got a shortage of them, including that they may be, more energy efficient. So I'm wondering about, the potential for a 2,600 square foot home, which is a pretty large home, and then another 900 square foot or 1,100 square foot detached home. I mean, so I guess my question is, if we're working with the 2,600 and then bonusing, are we going to get the kind of desired housing forms that we are looking for on Bowen? And then I guess the secondary question is that relevant in this discussion? But I just wanted to put it in there.
Yeah, I think it's a, go ahead, Daniel, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, and I guess that's sort of an option for council, or talking to the applicant is like, it could be an option for council to say, well, we support the rezoning, but part of what we're going to do is actually reduce that 2,600, and then we're going to bonus on top. So it's like, you want secondary suites, that's great, but it's going to be, everything but the secondary suite is going to be smaller, and then the secondary suite is a bonus. So if you're putting in the secondary suite, you've got the same amount of building you did before. And without the secondary suite, it's actually going to be smaller.
Or like I was saying, it could be a partial bonus. Maybe you don't give them the full 90 square meters, but you give them 45. You know what I mean? So there's enough of an incentive that they want to build a small unit, or if they want to take some from the main house. And I just did the Google Translate. It's actually almost 2,800 square feet, which is it's a pretty nice size house. So like if you give them a little bonus, that, is enough of an incentive that they can build extra. So they could take from the main house and you can get these different sizes, or they could build a really, modest suite or a modest detached one, whatever it is. But I think that's, I don't necessarily have the answer, but I agree. I think it's something to be discussed as to whether it's, a small bonus, or like you say, maybe it's reduced. I'd always be a little hesitant to reduce, because obviously people have bought the lots thinking they have this. And so to actively reduce it would be kind of, it seems unfair to me that people have purchased knowing something. So I wouldn't necessarily think that's the best solution, but I think maybe giving the balance of that maybe is a partial bonus, not a full size bonus for the attached one. We're almost out of time for this one, unless there's anything. The only other two things I've just thoughts that came to mind is, I think Daniel, you'd mentioned the next subdivision application for the rest of this is kind of already in progress. So I think just to consider that, obviously whatever council approves at this one will likely set a precedent, I'm guessing, for the next subdivision. So I think that, again, it's an interesting opportunity for these first 38, and then whatever the next number is, that likely a similar thing would probably carry through. Not necessarily, but
Robyn, the 38's all for this. It's just that the
subdivision hasn't happened. The zoning is in place, but not the subdivision. Okay. Yeah. Yep. So that's a moot point. And then the other thing, just to put on people's radar, it hasn't come up at all in our discussion yet, is obviously if people build these like a separate suite, attached or detached, they could become short-term rentals. And we have the regulations in place for that, but it's just acknowledging that that's also, as Fritz had said, lots of them might use it for personal use or visitors, or, I know lots of people who might have family come for a few weeks. It's nice to have a separate space for them, but there's also people who may potentially use them as short-term rentals. So just the impact of that on the neighborhood, which I feel like has been dealt with well through the regulations we have right now for secondary for short-term rentals, but just flagging it, that's just a consideration. If this does get approved, that is another use that people could be making of it. Is there any last comments? We've just got a few more minutes, Fritz.
Yeah. What Maureen said, I found it interesting because the whole word secondary suite, I mean, I think as the years go by, that gets a little bit outdated because it kind of presumes that there is a principal residence that has more space, and then there is a secondary suite that is rented out to somebody else who you don't know. But in my mind, it would be much better that you say from, well, people can build a single family house up to a certain square footage. They can get a bonus if they split that house in 2 parts. Because what's the rationale in having one large house with, I mean, it's so random if people just decide how they want to divide that square footage in one building, okay? I'm not talking about a detached building because that may be a discussion in itself, but then you get more diversity because like maybe they shouldn't be big and small. Maybe they should be 2 of the same size and it may work perfectly well for a family. You see what I mean? So I find it unnecessarily restrictive, but if I guess that's certainly not for this meeting. So let's move on. But
yeah, I think we've addressed some of those in our recommendations for revising the secondary suite bylaw. Steph's just reminded me, so we should make a recommendation. I think we've been asked for, so through this council referral, the Housing Advisory Committee support or not support the rezoning application and with the following comments. So Steph, do you have something drafted? Do you want to share your screen or? Yeah.
Thank you. Oops, wrong. Sorry.
well, good day.
Yeah. I'm here. It didn't rain.
Sorry, which screen is shared there?
Oh, nothing's shared at the moment.
It was there. It looked good for a second.
Was it the Word doc?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's saying it's sharing your and my conversation, Daniel. Like you it's full of
There it's starting.
it's
Oh,
the
there we
Word
go.
doc.
That looks good. Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so I just added Arbutus Ridge. I took out the names here. And then, am I
Okay.
getting this right to allow detached and attached secondary suites on the 38 properties over a certain size?
No,
No,
I
I
don't think
think
we want to
just
put
to
over
allow-
size. Yeah.
It's just to allow accessory residential use.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then sorry, I'm just kind of plugging away. I don't know if these are the same density bonus and 2-tiered zoning. Did we want to ask for that opportunity? What do you-
Yeah, I think they're saying the same thing. So maybe delete the top one and we'll work on that second one, the language of it. That council consider the opportunity to introduce incentivizing measures to increase, I don't know, uptake of building secondary suites. Is that the kind of thing, like to increase uptake of building secondary suites? And then, maybe semicolon, consider introducing 2-tiered zoning and maybe / density bonus. I don't know, Daniel, I don't know. I don't want to get hung up on the language of do they kind of mean the same thing to you, like 2-tiered zoning and density bonusing? Okay, so maybe just Steph / density bonusing.
I think the first one actually is a form of, I guess, 2-tier zoning.
Yeah. So I think we'll leave the exact
It's
details,
language.
everything there. Yeah. And then, and maybe just to follow up on our, what we've kind of had just talked about, consider allowing either partial or full floor space bonus for the construction of a secondary suite.
Yeah, and there may be a difference between bonusing detached or attached because it has a different impact on neighbors.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sorry, Fritz. What am I saying?
Well, there is a difference between detached and attached suites that may affect how you want to encourage one form or the other form. So, for
So maybe
instance,
Steph, consider attached and detached differently, something like that.
yeah, because if you really want people to be happy in their own small home, then you would encourage detached suites, and you may give a higher bonus for that than for a suite that is in a house. A suite that's in a house is far less likely to be rented out to a stranger. That's what people normally don't like about it. And if the moment it's a secondary, it's detached, it's much more likely that it will be rented out.
Okay, so does this work for everybody on the committee? Is everybody in favor of that, Maureen?
I feel like
And
Maureen.
I'd like to mention the capturing the lift in some way. I think council needs to look at that. I don't know if that's the language, but it's the point.
But it will increase property taxes, right? I mean, they will pay a larger share of the total.
Yeah,
property.
but I just want the issue to be put squarely in front of council, so that they talk about it and they may come to that conclusion, Fritz, but I'd like that to be done consciously.
Yeah, sure.
So just to catch up on this one, because I think it's an interesting point. What we're granting people is actually a significant uplift in the value of their properties if this comes to be.
Oh, I think significant was arguable. You'd have to get a bit of advice. I'm not sure that you're adding hundreds of thousands of dollars to
No.
value the property, but yeah, you'd have to find out more information. I'd be wary of the word significant. I don't know what the lift would be in the property value.
All right, so the level of the lift is at the moment is unknown. All right, so then Daniel, that will be I'm sure by the time this actually comes in front of us, then the some indication as to just what that lift might look like will be something that we will be able to discuss with greater background information.
Yeah, so maybe stuff it wants to say like capture the potential lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also just to remind, part of this discussion that council would be to remind council that the current arrangement involves a cash contribution to the community center. And I don't think that's on the radar of all council.
Yeah, so maybe if you can add that, Steph, just in that same point, just say, note the current zoning or current covenants include a, approximate $13,000 contribution to the community center.
You just want to say includes a contribution and not the money.
Just includes a
because
contribution? Okay.
Yeah, and then
Includes
I
a
can
contribution
explore in the staff report. But
to the community center. Okay. And I'm sorry to be a stickler about the language, but the beginning of that sentence that council consider ways to capture, I think just that council consider if they should consider ways to capture. Like, we're not saying you should, we're just saying, I think Maureen, what you're saying is let's put it on the radar. Like we should think about yes or no, should we capture them? If we say yes, then there's ways to do it. But I think, I don't think I would recommend that you should. I think you should think about whether you should.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah.
And just my other point, I don't know if the committee wants to say something even at like the first point about, in general, the committee supports, increased diverse options or something. So
I think just the first comment. Yeah, exactly, Steph. So maybe make a new comment. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Daniel. In general, the committee supports the proposed rezoning. I think that's reasonable.
Good, more words, Daniel.
Daniel, I just want to ask you this: is there a minimum home size? The reason I'm asking it is that I think at the moment, I remember when you did the number of homes that were built, and some of them you believe are actually detached, future detached secondary suites that are built first, and then later an owner builds the actual house. Now, so how does that relate to this particular scenario?
There's no minimum house size on Bowen.
So you can actually build the secondary suite first as your principal residence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not against that. It would make it more accessible for people that can afford the lot, but not to build the house, their dream house. But on the other hand, in some scenarios, which I think is happening to some degree, because Daniel, you actually said that, people build the secondary suites first, and then it may take some time maybe a longer time to build the house.
Yeah.
So how do you control that with the square footages of principal building and accessory suite?
I mean, it's always a kind of a funny one when it comes up. I'm not funny, but it's like, they're building it as a house, so they don't need to follow the regulations for detached secondary suite. We encourage people, like, if that's their intention, that like we say, okay, let us review it as if it was a detached secondary suite so that we can confirm it meets the regulations. And then assuming the regulations are the same when they can come for their second building permit, that they know that they're gonna be okay.
So if I can jump in, because we do need to wrap up this recommendation.
Yeah.
Steph, where you were just typing in that third point, I think where you got considering, I just say potentially consider attached and detached suites differently. Again, I don't want to, I know I'm being a little bit weird about, but I think we're not saying you need to consider them. It's just potentially consider instead of considering there. And then the only other thing I'd want to say is where we say at the beginning, end of that first paragraph, in general, the committee supports the proposed rezoning. I was just say, comma, as it will promote more diverse, the creation of more diverse units, promote the creation of more diverse housing,
Options.
the creation, of more diverse housing options for Bowen. Yeah, and recommend. So we've got that council consider the opportunity to introduce incentivizing measures to increase uptake of building secondary suites. I would say the first 2 points are kind of the same. So maybe instead of making them two separate points, considering secondary suites, comma, for example, introducing two-tiered zoning. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. The second point, that council consider allowing either partial or full floor space bonuses for the construction of secondary suite, potentially consider, just maybe consider instead of considering, attached and detached suites differently. And then the third point, that council consider whether they should capture the potential lift of value in the affected properties. Note the current covenant includes a contribution to the community center. Yeah. Okay. I think that's what I'm just looking back at some of my notes. I think that captured most of what we were talking about. Does that work for everybody? Any further comments? Not seeing any. Does anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Steph.
The language there is called a volunteer amenity contribution.
I think we can just leave that language. Like I said, Daniel can explain it in more detail, but it just, the fact that I think we flagged it, that it includes a contribution to the community center. Daniel can explain it in more detail. Okay, does anybody, am I allowed to move? I can probably move it, can't I? I'm allowed to move. Okay, anybody second it?
For sure.
Somebody, thank you, Fritz. Okay, all in favor of this recommendation? Yay, approved. Okay, nice work, everybody.
Great work, thank you.
Okay, we're only a little bit behind. So the next, well, and I feel like when we were looking at the agenda, the next two are kind of similar. So we've got the council referral of comments on the Housing Advisory Committee report to the Committee of the Whole. And we've got the minutes from that committee of the whole, but I think we're pretty much, most of us were in attendance. I know, Ron, you left partially through the way, but I think the rest of us were there, like you were there for most of it and the rest of us were there for all of it. So we're all pretty familiar with what happened. And the recommendations is that the Housing Advisory Committee received the minutes from there and resolved to proceed with the following priorities. Okay, and then I feel, sorry, why I'm kind of mumbling through this is the number 6, new business, is kind of working on creating a work, like I guess we're revising our work plan. We've had a work plan from earlier. We were going to touch on a few things, and now that we've had a little bit of more direction from council, is sort of reviewing that. So I feel like we could kind of combine the next two and go through what the feedback was from council in those minutes. So I'm flipping ahead to what is it, page 8 of the agenda, where we've got the minutes from the Committee of the Whole, and then we can maybe discuss how that, Steph, do we have like a Word doc or something from the work plan that we'd had previously? Because I know we thought we were going to tackle it kind of each month and do different things. And do we have that document around?
We do. I am
Bring
just
up?
working on
Okay.
this recommendation going to where it belongs. And
Okay. All right. If we bring that up in a few minutes. So from those, yeah, go ahead, Maureen.
We don't actually have a 22 work plan.
No, I don't think we do, because we kind of started mid-year this year. So we kind of planned out the balance of this year. So maybe that's what we could be talking about now is taking what we didn't get done, refreshing it with this, and then making a 2022 work plan. Because I feel like we got pretty good feedback, and I appreciate Maureen at that committee of the whole that you kind of summarized at the end and kind of got some, high level direction from council saying, yes, like to pursue certain things. So, okay, so if we go through,
I found the Word doc.
great. Well, when you're ready, yeah, if you want to share that on the screen. So we have these 8 steps and like the 8 recommendations, and I feel like pretty much let's go through them because the minutes should capture kind of where it was. So set housing targets.
Sorry, I'm so the 8 things are in the work plan or in the COW report.
I'm reading through the COW report, but if you could bring up on screen the work plan. That's what I'd like to be looking at. So hopefully everybody's got the agenda in front of them in a different format. They can look at the agenda separately as we're reading through it. And then if we can have the work plan on screen and you can do maybe Steph, can you do a file save as, do a 2022 work plan, and we can just kind of edit it as we go, delete things as we need to. So I'm going back to the agenda now, just looking. So number 1, set housing targets, and what was kind of, I guess, approved as a direction from council was a preliminary view of existing data. So I'm thinking that's going out, doing a review of what other communities have done, what some other examples are, and then bringing that back to the committee, and then maybe that can help us, draft out some targets, and then that can go back to council for a recommendation. Is that, Maureen, does that kind of make sense? What?
It makes sense, but I also think we need to anchor this in the housing needs assessment.
Okay.
And it probably makes sense for us all to review that needs assessment, given that it was done
A couple of years ago now.
And
yeah,
there may be some things that have changed.
Okay. So I think it's good. So we can still keep this heading, number 1, housing needs assessment. But I think I think like A and B can go, and then really this is C, which we've kind of talked about already. So set targets. So what we can do, maybe instead of where it says identify a specific number, maybe if you can make that like a secondary list under set targets. And the first thing we can do is like we can make exactly. So maybe the first point is, committee to review the housing needs assessment. The next one would be, a subcommittee to do research on other communities' goals. I'm wondering if that makes sense. And then I think we can roughly, we could wordsmith if we want, but roughly leave that third point, identify specific number of housing types, units to be available by certain dates to be approved by council. So that would be the end goal, right? Is that we would actually do some research, and then eventually, whether we check in with council first or not, but eventually we would be making a recommendation to council to say, here's the background, here's what we think is a reasonable target, and for their approval. Okay. Any other points on setting housing targets? No? Okay. So I think that's a good one. And that point, oh, sorry, go ahead, Steph.
Get rid of this.
Yeah, or even just make it red or something if it's sort of one we haven't.
Hey, Robyn, under the identify specific number of housing types, it says affordable, but it should maybe say accessible as well.
Sure. Yeah. And then, yeah, maybe Steph, make point B, just make it sort of red if we want to come back and revisit it. I just want to get through those 8 points that we did at the committee of the whole, but I don't necessarily want to delete that if we do want to keep it going. Okay, so the second one is encourage more secondary suites. So research potential of reducing lot size for secondary suites.
Where? Oh, you're okay.
I'm looking at the agenda. So that's what I'm trying. So I'm sorry if I'm, no, call me out if everyone's confused. I'm like looking at the agenda and then looking at our work plan and trying to combine the two. So that's where my mind is at. I'm reading the agenda on one of my screens, and then you're working on this work plan and trying to see where we can integrate them in. And then, like say, if we just highlight in red stuff that we haven't talked about then we can come back to the work plan and sift through it. But if we can first get through the agenda items, those 8 items, see where they slot into the work plan, and then we can look solely at the work plan, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I'm a little stuck on number 2. So encourage more secondary suites. Research potential of reducing lot size. So is that something that we as a housing committee, is Daniel still with us, hopefully? Is that something we as a housing committee need to provide research on? Or like what's, Maureen, Michael, do you recall the discussion on that? Like, or from council's perspective, what are you looking for from the Housing Advisory Committee on that point? Or Daniel, do you have a recollection of those? Any of you? Anybody?
You know, not specifically word-wise, because if I'm meant to be quoting council or someone else here, I'm not sure I can be totally specific on that.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have to go back and watch the video. of the meeting.
Would you please, rather than
Yeah.
get it half right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Okay.
The thing that crops up in the minutes is just, that second point, encourage more secondary suites, research the potential of reducing the lot size for secondary suites. So maybe
Is that something we do? Like, I'm thinking that's more of a,
You know,
a staff
it's kind of a staff thing. Like Daniel would potentially bring that to council to say,
Yeah.
hey, we're revising the secondary suite bylaw. Here's the implication. If we reduce it to this size, this many more lots are eligible. Like, I'm not sure that that's the Housing Advisory Committee. Like, we can go and research other communities and we can look at samples of bylaws or anything like that, but I'm not sure how much we can contribute to this one.
hey,
I
Robyn,
think that's right. That's probably
Sorry.
one that's on my plate rather than
Okay.
the housing.
Yeah.
Committee.
Okay, sorry,
Okay.
Fritz, go ahead.
Yeah, does this relate to that kind of pilot initiative as well? Because there's so many different lot configurations with topography and.
I feel like that might come up later.
Yeah, but so maybe because if it's a blanket reduction in lot size, but if Danielle is researching it anyway, it is more like you have to kind of watch that it's brought to the community in a slow, gentle way, kind of not like bang, there it is, and maybe it's not correct.
Again, I'm just I'm not clear on what the Housing Advisory Committee can contribute to this. So maybe we can leave that one as a we need to double check. Like, maybe I'll watch the video again of the meeting and see if there's any more clear direction on that, but I'm not seeing a clear direction. As I think it's more like it's in staff's, in Daniel's court to just kind of follow up on that. Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the minutes, which is on one of your screens, there are those 8 points, and one of the things that the intro to those 8 points is council provided comments on each option and identified which ones the committee may research further. And essentially 7 of the 8 we have been effectively tasked with as pursuing further. And I think what would be helpful would be to maybe just zip through those points and say, this is committee, this is really staff.
Yeah.
This is staff first and then committee input. This is committee and then staff input. Because there's a workload issue for our planning department here and a capacity issue for a bunch of volunteers. Would that help? Because I think in effect what we've got in those minutes is our work plan.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder, Steph, is it too much? Are you, because yours is very wide, are you able to put up this list of the 8 things next to this Word doc? Is that?
I am. Well, actually, I am. I'm just finding that my Word doc ends on page 1. Does your guys do that? No.
No, it seems to be
I'm gonna
showing up
try to
okay.
retrieve it from another location.
Okay.
So, like Robyn in that point too, and I think Danielle probably agrees with that, there should be distinction between attached and detached. Because it's very, It says research potential of reducing lot size for secondary suites.
Oh, I think that's for detached secondary suites. Yeah, I think you're right. That word's missing.
It says detached or attached because it makes a difference. Or you can, I mean, is it just detached because attached is allowed everywhere, or what?
Yeah, I'm thinking this point number 2, I'm thinking the minutes haven't maybe captured the whole discussion. So I'm thinking somebody needs to go back and look at the meeting video and maybe take some more robust notes, because I think it's a little too simple. And I agree that the point number 2, the bold point, is to encourage more secondary suites, but the follow-up research potential of reducing lot size is I think most applicable to detached secondary suites. So I just feel like the language is a little unclear. So I'm not sure that we can do too much on that one at this point. But I agree with Maureen. Like let's go through. And Steph, I don't know how are you doing on? Oh, okay. So you've got that to one side.
Just appearing now, but okay, sorry.
That's okay.
You know, I've got no second page on this document.
Oh, that's so strange.
That's strange. I've got another version that's track change that I.
Okay.
So, set housing targets is HAC.
Yeah. Is it possible to see them side by side?
Okay.
This list and then the work plan.
Right. Okay. Is there? Do I just do
There you
that?
go.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay.
No.
I just think it'd be useful
Oh,
if we had them side by side.
hallelujah.
Because agreed, Maureen, it's like basically this will create our work plan for next year. And then I just want to make sure if there are a couple things in our work plan that maybe we don't want to get lost, I just don't want to like delete it all and start fresh. I just want to make sure if there are a couple of things in there that we want to keep going. But yeah, they would say primarily these things. And again, it might not be all 8, or it might be in list of priority. We should prioritize, because again, I don't know that we can necessarily, between staff capacity and us as volunteers, we can tackle everything, but we can at least list them and prioritize them. So, okay, so we've done the first one. I think number 2, we just need to, I don't know where that fits in our work plan. If you could scroll down a bit, Steph, I don't know where the housing reserve, or sorry, the secondary suites, if that fits in somewhere already in our work plan, or if we just need to make a new.
We have to make a new housing assessment. Oh.
Okay. So, yeah. I'm wondering if we're going about this the wrong way. Maybe we should, sorry, everybody, I'm just trying to, maybe we should actually take the list of 8 and then go to do it the reverse. Take the list of 8 and then go back to our work plan and see if there's anything we need to bring over. Is that, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. So, Steph, is it possible for you to copy? Sorry, I'm so used to doing this
That's okay.
myself. So it's like I feel bad dictating to you what to be doing on your
It's
work.
absolutely fine.
Could you take those 8 points exactly and just make a new Word file with those 8 points, and we'll just kind of work through those. And still keeping that existing housing plan open so we can still see it on the same screen. Okay, great. All right, so let's do it that way. So maybe let's make a point. So yeah, so point 1 is preliminary review. I think that's valid. That's what we were talking about. And maybe you can copy what we just talked about in the work plan over. And then,
sorry, what's existing here?
Yeah, I think so. Just copy that set targets and those first few points and just throw them in.
Oh, you want
there.
me to copy it over to the right document?
Yeah, so I think the right-hand document, not the red stuff. Don't copy the red stuff over because that's not what we want. Just what we'd already talked through. Yeah, exactly. Just that's what we'd already talked through.
Hold on. Okay, so it's happening. It's working.
Yeah.
That.
Thank you. Okay, sorry. Thank you for filling my brain, how it's all trying to get done. Okay, so I would say then under encourage more secondary suites, I'd say, yeah, staff,
Yeah,
and then maybe a sub point of like, chair to review the meeting video to confirm if there's anything else needed from HAC. You know what I mean? Just again, because it might just be that it's on Daniel's plate, but I'll go back and check the meeting and we'll just make sure that we didn't miss something. Okay. And then, so then the next point is Housing Reserve Fund. So I think that would be maybe if we take where it says further explore. So I think maybe subcommittee to work with the CFO to explore options. That kind of language.
And just a side note, just yesterday there was a report released from UBCM regarding short-term rental regulation. Some of the recommendations include to investigate further changes to the MRDT to increase consistency across the province and to expand the use of tax revenue. And there's also a recommendation, which is interesting, I think, to expand the split classification of properties so that the commercial use of residential property for short-term rental accommodation is reflected in property tax assessments. So if this is a ways off, and who knows if these recommendations will result in any regulatory change, but the discussion is getting more active at the provincial / UBCM level.
I think that's great. Yeah, so Steph, exactly. I think if you could just say, you know, review the UBCM link, because I think that's really good language and that's something we could at least take into account if we're doing some research. Okay, and then I'd say the next point, number 4, if we make that research, make that the next little sub, like that A. So I would say research samples of, or like I guess subcommittee research samples of bylaws from other communities, other municipalities. We have a couple, but I'm sure we could find more. And then, Daniel, what would you want the Housing Advisory Committee to do to support your work? Like, would you want us to actually attempt to cobble together to draft a bylaw, or is that kind of your purview? Or like, how can we support you if we are going it through with, say, drafting it between the two part? If the planning department's drafting a different zoning, how can we support you?
I think the research side is helpful. And I think the bylaw drafting isn't as much.
Okay.
Because it's like, you know, ideally it's like the committee would do the research, bring it to council and look for direction for staff to develop the bylaw. Okay. Sometimes I have applicants who give me bylaws. And I say, thanks very much. And I shelve it. And
Right. Okay. No, that's good to know. So that's not helpful, but the research is. So we can find samples. We can maybe do a little report that would capture like, hey, we think this is what's relevant. Here's all the samples, but we're going to kind of do the research and pull what we think is maybe relevant for Bowen, but give you all the background as well, but we'll summarize it kind of thing. So, okay. I think that sounds useful. Okay. So number 5, changes to the land use bylaw. So I feel like this was, we've have some language in our past work plan probably. So I'm looking under, if we go into into our old work plan, just looking through.
Sorry, something's happening.
Yeah, it's okay.
Right, so.
The computer's thinking.
I'm not going to touch it for a sec.
So I'm looking back at the work plan and we've got, there you go, some exciting news.
Oh, there's Trump. I don't know how to get rid of that.
Oh boy.
Guest appearance.
Yeah. So we could take some, no.
Thanks for the update.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So number 2, if you go to 2C.
Yes.
I think we've already got some language there. So maybe I just copy all of that, 2C over to this change in land use bylaw. I think that will kind of at least captures at high level what we're talking about. And it's something, you know, that Fritz has been talking about for a while and all of that. So I think that could be, yeah, made into a report or something. Again, like Daniel, we can talk about it in more detail if we want later, or if it's helpful now, like what would be helpful for the committee to give you, like in terms of if there is another. I know you're still, are you actually through the first round of its bylaw reviews? I don't know where you're up to with that. No. Okay. So what would be useful for us as a committee to provide to you? Or should we lower this down the priority list? Maybe just because it's not your priority at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, probably lower priority than some of the other pieces.
Okay.
Or just like lower, like it would be later in the year.
Okay.
But
yeah, all right. I think that's probably enough information, because there's other stuff to do, right? So we can kind of prioritize other things and then maybe move that down. And then we'll see what happens if council does take us up on the recommendations we've made for Arbutus Ridge. Then it might come back a little more, you know, directly and actually be more applicable. So we can look at some of those things. Okay. So the next one, number 6, alternative modes of land tenure. So I think that's fairly straightforward, like research. That's just research and maybe looking at what other people have done. And I'm thinking actually, so yeah, I would just make that where it says all of the non-bolded there stuff, just maybe like make that the first point. Research potential pilot projects through calls for expression of interest, provide more information to council on community land trust. And I'm thinking maybe that's inviting a speaker or something like that. I think, yeah, and Maureen's nodding. So I would say, yeah, so invite a speaker. And I'll have to check. I haven't heard from them at all recently, but I'm pretty sure Vancouver has a land trust, or at least they had started one a few years ago. So we could see maybe if they're available, or yeah, I'm sure we can find somebody. Okay, and the next one, number 7, encourage attached and multi-family housing forms. Yeah, so that one through that cluster and duplex zoning. I wonder if there's anything else to be added in that point, or if we just delete number 7. If there's anything distinct and unique, because I know number 4 is kind of specifically that cluster and duplex zoning, but is there any other ways that we can encourage attached or multifamily? Do people think that that should be under this number 7, or is it kind of redundant at this stage? What do people think?
I wonder about the point that Rob Purdy made, which was to maximize the use of what we already have. Because that's not about cluster and duplex zoning. It's about something else.
Well, I feel like that's number 2, encourage more secondary suites, right? To a certain extent. That's encouraging development on already developed properties, right?
Could that maybe be added then under number 2?
That's what I'm wondering. So we go back to number 2.
You know, Robyn, I found it numbers, number 7 that disappeared.
Sorry.
For the multi-unit housing, I think that is more focused on larger buildings, and yeah, I think there's a difference. Like one of them is more like, how do you get more units in existing single-family neighborhoods or rural areas, and the other one is really more from. I mean, it's, for example,
yeah, no, that's
it's very
a fair
clear
point.
that 4-story buildings are more affordable than 3-story buildings if there's parking, right? So, I mean, those type of things. That's a different focus. Like,
okay, so let's capture both of these. So, Steph, if you could go back to 2 and make 2B, like make a 2B, and it would be, research how to develop more secondary suites on already developed properties. That's not great language, but it captures the essence of it. And maybe just put in brackets, Rob Purdy comments, kind of something like that. We can just kind of
tweak.
Yeah. Okay. And then then back to number 7.
oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Then what Fritz was saying, back to number 7. is maybe it's identifying opportunities. I don't know, identifying opportunities on islands that where larger, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, Fritz. I hear the distinction that, you know, small scale cluster and duplex zoning is one thing, gentle density, let's call it, you know, that kind of thing, which is distinct from this one's more about where larger, exactly, Steph, larger attached housing forms would be suitable on Bowen. I don't know if there's
in there.
Yeah, I mean, like so it's tricky because like obviously the easy answer is the Cove, like that's kind of where the OCP is telling us and all of that kind of stuff. And right now we're facing challenges of the sewer capacity that's really kind of halting anything in the near future, right? Until that's resolved. So I'm just wondering where we as a committee can contribute to this, because I feel like everybody kind of knows, yes, we need more of it. There's some in the pipeline. It's happening, but I don't know where we as a committee can really, you know, get movement on this one, because there are a few things that are kind of beyond our control that are limiting at the moment. So,
well, what I
I'm not
like
sure
about it being there, it will just introduce an idea. And I think I mentioned it in the last meeting a bit, that I believe that a lot of people want to stay in their existing communities. And that if there are, in a modest scale, maybe on a neighborhood basis, there may be one building or so where actually more units can be built, and it's actually seen as a positive in the neighborhood, because it will free up some homes for families and the people that want to. I think a lot of people stay in their homes because they simply want to stay where they are. It's just that simple. And then
so
if you
Steph,
give it, yeah.
So Steph, could we add point B? Sorry, it's hard because I literally want to type something, so it's very hard while I'm listening to Fritz. I'm like, and it's hard because I have to dictate this stuff. So
my son just got his L. I know how you feel.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we go, if we say identify challenges and opportunities for it's kind of restating the same thing as the first one, maybe opportunities for housing forms in different neighborhoods. Maybe that's what it is, because like obviously there's the Cove and everybody's kind of more in favor of that, but maybe that's what Fritz is talking about, is like what would be the challenges and opportunities in different neighborhoods outside the Cove.
Yeah, it introduces the idea. That's all about.
Yeah, the larger attached here.
Yeah, for larger attached housing forms.
So is that like a townhouse or a condo or something?
I think it's basically more than a duplex, really, is kind of, because like we're kind of dealing with duplex and then maybe a little cluster one. This is more like, you know, bigger than that. So yeah, maybe if you want to say, you know, e.g., like, you know, bigger than, you know, townhouses, bigger than duplexes, those kinds of things. Yeah, Maureen, yeah.
We have the expression of interest for Area 2, Lot 1 that just closed yesterday.
No, next week. No.
Next week. Does that need to appear somewhere in here?
Well, that's a good question, Maureen. So like what's the plan, if you can share it with us? Like, will council be reviewing those publicly? Will they be reviewing them, you know, privately in a closed meet? Like what does council plan to do with those? Are they going to come to the committee so we can review them? Like, I guess that's a good question, is like, what's the plan once you get those?
Yeah. Daniel, are you able to comment on that? Because I don't know.
I don't know if I am in a meeting. I mean, the answer probably is like, it depends, and probably it starts with a closed council like review of all of them, and then sort of depending, I think, on what is received, it might change. Yeah.
So maybe just to that point, maybe let's add 7B, Steph. We'll just say potentially review the replies from the REOI of Area 2, Lot 1, you know, and just make an Lot 1, Area 2, and then maybe just in brackets, you know, depending on council's, response and if it's referred to us, just so it's in there, but it's kind of dependent. We have to get an instruction from council, obviously, because we won't be privy to them. So, but I think it's I think that's good, because it'll hopefully those replies will show what level of interest there is, what kind of forms people are willing to do, and then, taking that information and then saying, well, obviously, who knows what it can do, and maybe is it what they're proposing, because we'll get a lot of information from it. Is that relevant to other parts of the island? So that could be interesting. Okay, that's great. And then number 8, we want to, what's number 8? Proactive rezoning. Oh yeah, I feel like this is kind of like I don't know if it's just me. I feel like this is like the touchiest, biggest kind of far-reaching one. And again, and I think it is,
one,
yeah.
Is this one the council said was like the lowest priority? Is that my memory of that committee of the whole?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. And it was also like, really, because it's like, it's a big thing, and it would, because there's an election in less than a year, it would likely be the new council to take it on. So that's what I think. I think it stays as a priority for maybe the latter half of the year. Because basically it would be the purview of the new council. I think it kind of felt clear that this existing council is not something they would attempt to tackle in the next however many months. It's again, like, that's my sense, is it's just kind of, it's a little too big.
Yeah.
Maureen, Michael, does that kind of
Correct.
match your recollection?
Correct.
Yeah.
That was my sense too.
Yeah.
But also, I think there was an understanding that it would be one of the most powerful things that could be done to
Agreed.
foster more.
Yeah.
So not a high priority in the short run, but a very high priority in the longer.
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. So I think you've captured there. So let's put it for late, 2022. It's something we can start talking about and then bring to the newly elected council next year as an opportunity for them to tackle in their term.
One thing that's not captured here is one point that's in the current island plan, which was that this year we were to work on developing the affordable housing policy into a more general housing policy that would have affordability as part of it, but would talk more broadly. So
Right.
where do we want to go with that?
I think that's a fair point. I'm wondering, certainly, I'm just trying to think where the committee could help. We could certainly do some high-level research into looking at what other communities have housing plans and what that looked like. And then maybe, I don't know, if we're appropriate to do, or if staff, like, because I'm thinking that's a really big thing. like a housing plan is a big thing. And I don't know whether that's staff has the capacity, or if it's like an outside consultant, finding grant funds and then an outside consultant creates it, or like, I'm not sure if it's just a long-term thing that the planning department chips away at, or I'm not clear on that. I think that's above and beyond what a housing advisory committee volunteer group could contribute to, but certainly we could potentially, just research and find examples. I think that's something we could do.
I think, Robyn, it's like a review of our existing affordable housing policy.
Okay.
So it's like where we seek the 15% floor area at time of rezoning.
Okay.
And it's like looking to revise that. Like, does it make sense? Is there language that reflects what we're trying to do now? Does it meet our targets and stuff?
So I would say, Steph, let's make this point number 9. And I'd say those are 2 different points. So one would be developing a housing policy as opposed to a strictly affordable housing policy. And then the second one would be, I'd leave policy development as a heading. 9, policy development as a heading's fine. And then the 2 sentences that you've got could each be A and B. That's all So I think potentially development of a housing policy, and that's maybe just research, and then review the existing affordable housing policy, and does it need any revision? Because it's old, like it's 10-ish years old now, right? So it's probably due for a revision. You've already got it.
It didn't really get used though for probably 6 or 7 of them.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, but I think you're right. Like it's a good, now it has been used on however many. So maybe it's like, oh, okay, here's the 5 projects it's been used on. this is what it, so the policy was here, it actually resulted in X. Is it achieving what we want it to achieve? What would we suggest are some tweaks or changes that might have better outcomes, or is it fine as it is, kind of thing. So I think that's a really good point. And yeah,
I would like that, because affordable housing policy, fine, of course, but I also like the idea of an accessible housing policy. Maybe that's just part of A. But
yeah, I think that's part of A, is like developing a housing policy, like overall, that, and maybe we put research other communities, and maybe it's comma stuff. Yeah, include accessible,
because,
diverse.
That really
diverse.
relates to what I brought up earlier, that people like to stay in their neighborhoods and they're forced out. Now, why they're forced out? Many times it's because of reasons for accessibility.
Right.
And then care,
Yeah, and I would say that point A, maybe we put in brackets or a note. I think that must follow the setting of the targets. I think we have to set the targets first, and then move to. And again, I don't think we're developing the policy. I think maybe we're just doing the potentially the research or making some recommendations. Oh, where did that stuff go? Oh.
Still there.
Just those 3 bullets I put into this 1 bullet.
Oh, okay. So I would say, yeah, at the end of point A, just put in at the end of there, just put in brackets, to follow establishment of the housing targets. And I'd say that that's kind of lower priority, because I think that's a really big task that's going to require, developing a housing policy is a really big thing that probably needs more discussion as to who does what and everything. But we can research other communities, and then the housing targets will inform that. But I think A would be a lower priority. But what B? Reviewing the existing housing policy, I think that could be, so maybe put lower priority under, no, that's okay, just put lower priority under A, and then I think B is a normal priority.
Okay.
Thank you, Steph, you're doing very well.
No, I'm
To
really
my
having
dictation.
fun. Thank you.
All of that, yeah, thank you.
And please, God, save that document.
I know.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't, because of the screens went crazy, and it's doing one drive, which I don't like using. So
Yeah.
okay, everyone, just take a little break. There we go. Okay, I'll rename it after Maureen. It's doing a different route.
And then we didn't lose that second point, right? Or whatever. We had A and B there. Oh, good. Okay, that's not gone. Good. Yeah, I think that captures it. So yeah, it's just that B is a lower priority. We can tackle that later. Okay, phew. Okay, I think that, so the only thing we haven't done is maybe quickly go back to the work plan, the other Word document, and just see if there's anything that we've missed. But I think we've kind of captured, we were down to 4 in our last one. So the housing needs assessment, which I think has been translated over to those housing targets,
Not
challenges
direct.
and opportunity. Yeah, which I think is fine, because I think that gets addressed in the other ones about one thing that hasn't been captured maybe is like, do we want to, is it useful, again, this is back maybe to Michael and Maureen and Daniel, like, is it useful for us to identify additional opportunities for expressions of interest, or is it like we're kind of where we are now and let's see what happens? Like, that's the only thing I'm seeing from here. The number 2 B is it useful for us to potentially, or maybe is that tied into that duplex and cluster zoning research? Maybe that's another point in there. So maybe number 4, we write C, maybe possibly, just like, let's write possibly identify opportunities.
UI opportunities?
Yeah, maybe EOI or rezoning opportunities, something like that. it's not quite the right language, but you know what I mean, is capturing that in that zoning.
Mhm.
So we can research them and then say, hey, we think, you know, there's an opportunity in these neighborhoods or whatever. Like we can kind of just do that as a, okay, I think that captures it. We've captured that.
Okay, right.
And then the financial tools, I think we've that, oh yeah, did we talk about land tenure? Sorry, I feel like did that get missed in the new work plan? Did we talk about land tenure? Sorry, I'm just drawing a blank. Yeah,
Not
number
really.
6. Okay. We didn't really talk about that one. Oh yeah, we talked about community land trust and then research potential pilot projects through Culver. Okay, so I think a higher priority is about the community lands trust. I think that's a really easy one that we can find a speaker and invite them. So I'd say that's a high priority. And then maybe it's a lower priority, the point A, just because I feel like that's a little bit of a bigger thing. And I think and I think that captures kind of in our last work plan, the innovative housing solutions and stuff. I feel like that's been captured in all of these. And then, the other thing would be just to make sure, I think we've got kind of that speaker series we had talked about previously, but, and we had community land trust there, would be to continue maybe speaking to a couple more developers and inviting them to our meetings. Because I think that's been really useful feedback. So I don't know if we just make that, point number 10 or something is, speaker series. And, and then we can just reiterate, community lands trust and developers. And I think that captures it. Okay, is anybody else? I'm just looking at the clock. I think we were supposed to go to 11:30, so we're still a little early. Does anybody? I think we've sort of got a draft. I think it might be useful to I can review this again, and then we can maybe through email, people can provide comments, because it might be a little bit much to kind of like 100% solidify this, but as a rough draft, I think we're there. Does anybody have any further comments on the 2022 work plan as this draft? And then we can go through email to kind of think about it a little bit more and provide comments.
No, Robyn, all good for that. Maybe just leave a little bit of time, please, for us to review this. I'm looking at next week, and it isn't easy. So please don't expect a return within 24 hours.
Well, do we want to take, I don't think there's a rush. We could take a couple of weeks to do that and then have it set for the next meeting. And then we can vote on it or whatever, finalize it at the next meeting.
Yeah,
and then,
that would just a little period of time would be appreciated.
Yeah, and I think that's good timing, because obviously if we do a next meeting early December, then we're set for our work plan for 2022. And then it would just be, do we want to invite a speaker for our next meeting? And we had somebody lined up, didn't we?
Yeah. So
Allard.
it was
Allard
Allard.
was going to come.
Yeah, first of all, I felt it was a little odd to have his application in, but also
we did.
Yeah, it's a crowded agenda, but he was keen.
So could we ask him to come and speak at the next meeting?
Yeah, he's already wanting to come for the next one. I guess the date.
Yeah.
Be, but
Okay.
I'd like to suggest as well that we're low on members, so I'm
Yes.
finding these speaker series are actually a way of kind of supplementing the voices at the table as well, which is a really good experience from my end.
Could I, may I just ask Daniel? Daniel, would you be comfortable with Allard coming to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Or is it?
I don't think it's any more than like the previous meeting we had Mark Shea, who's thinking about potentially applying in the future.
Okay, so you're fine with it.
So I think we'd do the same briefing notes in terms of like, talk to us generally about development challenges you have. Don't try to pitch your like particular application necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it was good for that, because I don't think we'll have their proposal won't be on our agenda next month, will it? Like, because we've talked about it this
No.
month. So yeah, because I think that was where I felt it was just a little bit of a conflict that we didn't, it just, yeah. So I think if he's coming and his proposal isn't on our agenda, and exactly, if we keep it at that high level of his experience and what he thinks and all of those kinds of things, that would be great. So yeah, Steph, if you could go ahead and invite him. And if for some reason that, can we look at the first Friday? Does that work again for people, the 3rd at the same time at 9:30?
Robyn?
Yeah.
I have Islands Trust meetings, quarterly meetings, the first week of December.
Okay.
The 10th maybe?
Does the 10th work for people? Maybe
10th.
most people. Yeah.
It doesn't work for me, sorry.
Okay. We've done Mondays sometime. Do Mondays work? I've forgotten if that's.
Which Monday? The
Well,
6th?
well, I guess probably opposite of council meetings. You wouldn't, or you tell us, councilors, you tell us what Mondays would work for you.
Well, we have council meeting on Monday, the 13th of December.
Okay,
So what
so
about
would
the
you prefer
6th?
to do the 6th then? Does that, so you don't have a really, really long day?
I can't do that one either, sorry.
Okay.
It's okay.
Would
Wednesday the
the
8th.
would the 9th work for anyone?
No.
No?
So we have 1 or 2 meetings before the end of the year.
I think this would be the last one. We
Okay,
just
okay.
have the one more left.
Mm-hmm.
I could do the 13th in the morning. Michael, would you be?
Yes, yeah, I'm with you, Maureen. The day is committed to a council meeting, so quite honestly, one more day, the day from that point of view, in terms of organizing anything else, I would rather do that than clutter up the week with
Okay.
other commitments. Yeah, and put them, group them.
Okay, so if we go on the 13th, and I'm flexible that day on time, so it doesn't have to be first thing in the morning. Does anybody else have time restrictions those days? Like, would it make more sense, councilors, for it to be like a 1 p.m. or do you know what I mean? Like, so you're not stretched for 12 hours of the day, that you just sort of, does it matter?
I would prefer a little bit of a break, to be honest. Otherwise, it's 1, and then if we finish late that night, it's extra. You know, let's the
Yeah,
current.
so do we just, so stick with 9:30? Does that work for people?
Yeah.
That's good for everyone? Yeah, okay, there we go, we've said it, yay. So 9:30 on Monday, the 13th.
Send a calendar invite with when I create the Zoom event.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, everybody. So yeah, we'll send out the draft of the work plan so everybody can review that, and then well, maybe Steph will send out like a due date for
I just
comments. Okay,
I made
yeah,
one.
so in a few weeks, at least ahead of the meeting, so then we can compile them and then you can approve it at the meeting, and then hopefully we'll have a guest speaker. And yeah, excellent. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Okay, good work.
Nice to see you all.
Okay.
Yeah, see you next month. Okay, bye.
Bye.
So Maureen, you and I can hold on for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be ending the meeting. Do you want me to give you the
Can we just have a couple of minutes? It's